Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. Be inspired by the voices of visionaries, changemakers, and ordinary, extraordinary people who do what they do, all for the love of learning.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. I'm Lady Liberty, and this is episode number 106. In tonight's show, we're going to explore the minds of boys and girls, look at the biological differences on how that affects growing up, learning, behavior, and more. Tonight, we're going to speak with three guests who work with the principals taught at the Gurian Institute. The Gurian Institute provides advanced training workshops for educators, therapists, and parents. When addressing data and gaps associated with race, socioeconomic status, and or language background, it's critical to examine the role gender plays in patterns of achievement, classroom management, and student engagement. This training is not a new curriculum. It's a holistic nature which grows from its fidelity to all three fundamental areas of child development: nature, nurture, and culture. It builds understanding of boys and girls in all settings, curricular, extracurricular, and behavioral areas. Tonight promises to be an interesting conversation, and we've got a lot to talk about with an amazing panel to explore these ideas with. So I'm anxious to jump right in. But first, I'm going to read an intro to each of our panelists. And I want to remind our audience that you can find out more about each of our participants on the show notes page located at fortheloveoflearningshow.com, and look for the show notes page for episode number 106. There you will find more information about each of our panelists, links to their projects and websites. So I'd first like to introduce tonight's first guest, which is Katie. Katie is a former K-12 school administrator and co-author of Why Teens Fail, What to Fix. She's been an educator for 23 years, serving as a secondary school teacher, middle school guidance counselor, and a K-12 assistant principal. Katie is also the founder of SHE, or SHE, formed Sharing Healthy Experiences, Serving Teens and Their Families, and co-founder of the bullying prevention program, Be the One. Katie serves as co-consultant consultant with Dr. Michael Gurian for the National Center for the Development of Boys in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Welcome to tonight's panel, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share.
You're very welcome, and we're so excited to jump in. But first, I'd like to introduce you to Veronica. Veronica began her journey in education the day she became a mom. Her greatest joy is making a difference in children's lives. She became involved in education, serving as PTO president and then a parent council president. She enjoyed the time she spent in the classroom working with students, which was the motivation for her to pursue her master's degree in education. She began a career as a middle school science teacher in the Scottsdale School District. She then completed her principal certification and moved into a position as an instructional coach. And for the last 3 years, she has been an elementary principal. She is also very active in the community, serving on boards of nonprofit organizations. So we're really happy to have you on tonight's panel. Welcome, Veronica.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
You're very welcome. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to Tricia. Tricia has been involved in early childhood education for over 25 years. She began a career as a teacher and then became education director. Tricia was also instrumental in writing and the revision of the Arizona Early Learning Standards. Tricia is an educator, parenting coach, and Gurian trainer. Tricia is a strong advocate of the Child and Family Unit. Welcome to tonight's panel, Tricia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
You're very welcome. So Tricia, why don't we start the conversation with you? Can you please tell me how you came to work with the Gurian Institute and what attracted you personally to the program?
Well, I found the Gurian Institute through Katie McPherson, who's on the panel today, and through social media. I saw lots of Facebook posts that she posted on a local site here in Arizona. And I noticed that a lot of her posts really aligned with my philosophy of education and child development. So Katie and I kind of started communicating, and I got more involved with the Gurian Institute. And last year I went to the Summer Institute in San Diego and was certified as a trainer. And I'm very happy and proud to be part of the Gurian Institute. And I have two sons. And so I think having two sons, knowing there's a difference, looking through a gender lens, has taught me a lot about being a parent as well as an educator.
Fascinating. I know we're going to get into kind of the foundation of what the Gurian Institute offers and what their training looks like. So we're going to save that for a little bit later on. But I'm just curious, before we move on to the other introductions, Tricia, what is it that you said aligned with your style of teaching or your philosophy of education? What is it specifically that attracted you to incorporating the Gurian Institute's philosophy into your own?
Well, looking, like I said, I've worked in early childhood education with young children, birth through 6 years old, for over 25 years. And just being in a classroom and noticing the difference between boys and girls in the classroom. Again, it's not, there are, overlaps, but boys most often are very busy in the classroom, don't sit still very often, and need to move. And girls do too, but more than often it's the boys that have a difficult time listening, sitting down, and need to move. And that was a platform that I really could get behind and wanted to learn more about. And it was all based on neuroscience and the science in the brain and the brain scans and all the hormonal differences, and just learning all of that helped me become a better educator, parenting coach, and a parent myself.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to exploring that a little bit deeper as the show goes on. So thank you, Tricia.
You're welcome.
Why don't we jump on over to Katie next? Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? You've got a pretty long background in education as well, and you're dedicated to working with the Gurian Institute as well. Can you talk about where the intersection was in your career and why you were attracted to this type of training? And Katie, you're muted, so unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm unmuting. Last 10 to 15 years of my career has been spent either in a dean position or assistant principal position. So most of my experience has been in school discipline and spending a lot of one-on-one time with students in my office. And as I looked at the data, most of the students in my office were boys. Most of the things they were being referred to me for were disciplinary in nature, for touching each other, shoving each other, being very physical with each other. And so I went to the Gurian Summer Institute one summer just kind of on a whim. And one of my passions was helping my male students especially. I am one of 5 girls and I have 4 daughters. So the girl thing came pretty easily to me. But boys were like this fascinating thing. Like I couldn't figure out like what exactly is going on here. And so Dr. Gurian presented his keynote and I was just blown away how much I didn't know, how much of the neuroscience is not put into our education classes as undergraduates, and that we never really touch the subject of the brain and how the brain works. We learn our content, how to deliver it, how to manage a classroom, how to discipline, but not much about neuroscience and what the needs are there. And so that's kind of how I stepped into this role out of public education and into national training of teachers, parents, and administrators.
Interesting. I'm so fascinated to learn more about the science behind the differences between females and males. I've read a lot about the brain development as it applies to adolescent development because that's the group that I work with, but I've never read anything that divided the gender. So we'll get into that for sure. I really want to hear about that. But Katie, you talked about one thing. You said that the attraction was how to address the disciplinary actions or discipline issues in your school, and the majority of them were coming from males. Can you talk a little bit about, just so I understand, what would be a disciplinary, what would get a boy sent to your office?
Well, statistically, just in the U.S., boys are referred to front offices starting in preschool 5-1 over girls. So I've been an elementary administrator, I've been a junior high administrator, and I've taught high school. So I have a lot of experience with every age child, but looking at statistics and Dr. Gurian's research, what we're seeing is boy energy is not being welcomed in the classroom in the same way that girl energy is. Meaning boys are hands-on experiential learners, and most of what's still going on in our schools is rote memorization and lots of worksheets and direct instruction. So we're still not teaching to how boy brain learns best, and that's by movement. So Dr. Gurian's research and all of the things that he implements in the classroom is more physical movement to get those boy brains up and moving, while also helping those girls take some more risks within the classroom.
That's really fascinating. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. But first I want to make sure that Veronica, we actually move over to you and you have the chance to share with us a little bit about your background and what attracted you to incorporate the Gurian Institute training and processes into the work that you do.
So I never thought I'd be in education. I have an undergrad in marketing, which I say works well for me as a principal, but I really got involved in schools with my own kids. I was the parent that didn't sleep at night, making sure they got in the right classrooms and all that. And then got so involved in the schools that, and I have a boy and a girl. My son's now 29, my daughter's 25. So they're out there. But I got so involved in education, realizing how important it is for the parent involvement. And then the teachers kept telling me, you need to go back and get in the classroom. You need to do this with all the time I spent. And so I did. And, fast forward, PTO president, teaching, instructional coach, master teacher, all that. And then I met Katie. Katie was my assistant principal in middle school. And I worked with her on the Sharing Healthy Experience. That's how I got involved. We'd spend our weekends talking about relational aggression with girls. And and now as a principal, I still love working with the mean girl issues and resolving it and working with girls. And then I've always kept in touch with Katie because we both have such a passion. And becoming a principal now, our school is based on educating the whole child. And so really looking at the social, the emotional, which, we all know that academics is important, but that social emotional piece is so important with kids. So then Katie and I kept in touch, and this year we were working towards going away from curriculum. I have amazing staff, and we all know curriculum, but we need to understand kids and how they learn. And so we had this focus on how kids learn, and in talking to Katie, it was working with all our trainings. So Katie came and did a presentation, and I can honestly tell you it was the most impactful professional development my teachers have ever had. It has changed how they look at kids. The discipline is going down because all of a sudden they realize that this is what boys do. We're putting alternative seating in the classrooms. We're doing stand-up desks in the classroom, and it's making an impact on my campus that is beyond anything. So we are having a Garion Institute conference on my campus in September. We're so excited, and we're looking forward to having others from the district. And it's a passion for me to bring others in because I want to make a difference in all kids' lives. So I wish you could see the difference it makes watching these little boys on their wiggle chairs and focusing, whereas before they were getting up and moving around and getting in trouble. And so it's truly made an impact on our campus, just again, looking at how kids learn and how they learn differently and handling them that way.
Oh, okay, so there's so much to talk about. What I want to know is, Veronica, you mentioned looking at how kids learn first. That was the foundation of what inspired the need for change. Can you guys, I just want to open this up to the panel. Veronica, you can answer the question first, but can you please respond to how do kids learn? And if we're going to divide it into a gender issue, what does that look like? So we know we've set the groundwork, so we know what we're talking about here.
Well, and I think the biggest thing, what was great is that I started out as a science teacher and knew nothing about science. It was just such a need for science teachers. And I learned along with my kids, but I learned how important it was for kids to be hands-on, for kids to be moving and doing and touching and feeling their learning. And so we don't think it does, but it really goes into every content area. And so really getting kids to move around and talk to each other and feel their learning and talk about their learning. The kids need to be doing the learning in the classroom. And so that was what was important to me, is looking at it from that point of view. But the difference in boys and girls, one of the things that Katie taught us that we really have taken is boys can't handle as many words as girls. And Katie can give you the details on that, which it's so amazing. But we really have to be careful. We use up our word. We joke all the time. It's too many words, isn't it? And so my whole staff is female, except for I've got a couple special, an art teacher and a music teacher male, but the classroom teachers are all females. And so they really need to they need to understand how men learn. They have to look at boys in a different way. And not only is it important for my female teachers, but it's changing their relationships and how they deal with their husbands and men. So it's bigger than the classroom. It's the real world of dealing, the difference of men and women.
And Tricia, or I'm sorry, Katie, did you want to jump in, or Tricia?
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, I want to say, from an early childhood standpoint, it's very similar to elementary in a way that we know learning needs to be real, relevant, and meaningful for children to really absorb the learning. And so that's what Veronica was talking about, was hands-on sensory learning, not just worksheets over and over. And we know that children retain that information. We know that through brain scans and through research that children retain that information better than just a skill and drill approach. Another thing that I think Veronica touched on that was very important is that most of us are women that work in early childhood education and elementary. And we have to understand boy brains and understand that not all boys that are active and can't pay attention don't have ADHD. I think in my field, I hear teachers come to me all the time, oh, this boy can't focus, he can't sit still, he can't do this, I think he has ADHD. And the first thing I say is, we're not doctors. Let's take a look at this boy. He's a 3-year-old little boy. No, he can't sit still. He wants to move. He wants to throw things through the air. He wants to push his friend over because he wants to be his friend. And that's what we need to learn as educators, especially as women, to tolerate some of that movement emotion. And I think that's really crucial.
You talk about movement emotion. Can you expand on that a little bit more? And is that only specific to male development and neurodevelopment in boys?
Let Katie talk about that. She's
Well, Dr. Gurian's research is over the past, am I unmuted? Dr. Gurian's research over the last 30 years is, studying different cultures, boys and girls in play, boys and girls in the classroom. And what he came away with, not only from a brain scan standpoint, but from a development standpoint, is boys bond by moving objects through space, whether it's each other, a pencil, a ball. When you look at how active they are, they really need that movement in the classroom that's physical and intentional to move all of them out of what we call the neural resting state. Now, girls have the same need. Everybody has a need for movement. We know that physical, intentional movement in the classroom gives us the most mileage and the most bang for our buck, so to speak. But what's not happening for our boys, and when we look at, there are 7 billion brains on the earth, so bracketing out an exception rate of 1 in 6 or 1 in 7, you will have boys in the classroom that are perfectly fine, sitting, compliant, and don't need that physical movement. But when we look at social emotional development and how their friendships form and what developmental stages they go through, typically in free play and in friendships, the mileage that they get is touching each other, playing with each other, getting aggressive. Some kids don't find any success in the classroom, and the most success they find and the most profound success they find is during free play. And so when we look at teacher training, we want to look at, do we always need to intervene in free play? When is rough too rough? And when we look at girls, they bond through verbal emotive and through words. And so as a female teacher speaking to a male student, we want to be really cognizant of not overwhelming that male brain with too many words, and also within the classroom, having a safe container for that boy energy. How, as a female, do I allow those males in my classroom the ability to be hands-on, experiential, but also be safe in alignment with the code of conduct and, of course, a safe classroom management policy and procedure.
Can you talk a little bit about the learning styles that have been identified throughout the years through many, many psychologists? Most people don't break up the learning styles by gender. And can you address a little bit, Katie?
I think they're universal. I mean, certainly I've read those research studies and align with a lot of those different philosophies, whether it's Goleman or Kagan styles, things like that. But I think it's important to note that as the brain is developing, especially for boys, the testosterone levels are rising with boys. And so when you're looking especially at adolescent boys and they're getting 7 to 10 testosterone spikes a day, that's going to impact any sort of learning style. And so when you look at boy brain versus girl brain, and you look at the connective tissue in the white matter brain, which is where girls definitively have strength. The transfer of information and the efficiency of the processing sometimes can be greater. That doesn't mean girls are more intelligent than boys. It just means there's different strengths in those learning styles. And again, we have something we call Bridge Brain at the Gurian Institute, where it's a hybrid, where you'll have a really hyperverbal boy or a really, artistic verbal student that, it can be girl or boy. So it's not, pigeonholing them into one thing. But typically when you look in a classroom of 24, 25 students, you have boys that are excelling in logical, mathematical, and spatial reasoning, and you have girls being really easy to get to task on writing assignments that involve a lot of direct instruction and a lot of words. So for example, a 7th grade boy, and you give him a novel with no graphic images, no spatials, nothing on the board as you're giving direct instruction. Boy brain wants to see those visual images. It wants to picture that story. And those words for some kiddos will completely just overwhelm the brain, and they will go into that neural resting state, which then affects learning style.
So are you saying that each individual learner then has their own unique place in the spectrum?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
So all three of you have taken the Gurian Institute training practices into classrooms and have seen these principles applied in the classroom arena. Can you talk a little bit about how this is expressed individually for each student, or is it a general, half the class is girls and you go over here and do your thing, and half the class is boys, you go over here and do your thing? Can you share? And I'd like to hear from all three of you, if possible.
I'm going to let Veronica pop in first.
I'll go ahead because we're just starting with it, and we're doing a lot with, like I said, we have the alternative seating, these wobble chairs and the stand-up desks, and just watching teacher. I think for me it's so impactful for my teachers. You do a professional development, the teachers get excited at the time, and then they walk out, and it's just more work. This isn't. This is something that they can put into a classroom the minute they walk back in. It's because they've changed their thinking, and that's hard to do in education. They've truly changed their thinking, and they look at boys differently. And again, some boys, not every boy, but when they were listening to Katie, when Katie came in and did the professional development for my teachers, you could see light bulb moments of every teacher of which boys that they knew they're not ADHD, but they can't get them to focus, and they just were having to redirect, and now they've changed their thinking. And so all of a sudden you walk into classrooms and there's more tolerance. It has definitely created that tolerance level. They're not irritated with little boys because now they understand that's why. And again, it's not every one of their boys, but it's a few of them that really stand out. But there's also some girls. So we have these wobble chairs, and they have to pull sticks because everybody has to have a chance because everybody wants to do it. But we know that there's certain boys that we really want to have, so we want to have more and more of them in the classroom. So it's really changing the thinking of our educators to have that tolerance level. But from an administrator's point of view, I have an assistant principal. She does discipline, but I was the assistant principal, so I still like to be involved in the discipline. But one of the things that Katie talks about too is that eye contact with boys. I would always have them sit across from me and say, look me in the eye when I'm talking to you. Can't do that. It puts them at a disadvantage where now I bring them around to the side of my desk and it's shoulder to shoulder and I'm talking to them, and it's so much easier to work with little boys now. They're able to relax and talk about what they did and what they're going to do. We always talk about everybody makes mistakes, and we learn from our mistakes, and it's all about being successful. And so it's so much easier when I take them out of that feeling. And I know some people think when you're disciplining and it's not. It's teaching kids. Discipline's about teaching kids as much as anything in the classroom. So it's getting away from that. Look me in the eye and do as I tell you, and having that dominating over them more so than, and it really does help when I bring them around my desk and I start talking to them. So it's just different things that I've learned. Whereas girls, they love to sit across the desk from me and eye to eye when they're in trouble. And we have that girl to girl talk. But for boys, it brings down that stress level for them so that you can really talk through what just happened and what they're going to do.
I'm sorry, am I up? I think Lainey's muted. Okay, I'm up. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I think what the difference it's made in my background in education and what we do in the classroom at our school is that number one, the tolerance, teaching the teachers what is developmentally appropriate for boys and for girls at this certain developmental age. Plus, we've looked at our environment. We know that boys need more space in the classroom. And so we've rearranged our classrooms to have more space so boys can move freely around the classroom. But we also, girls like to sit in their little areas with groups. And so we have pillows on the floor. We have chairs in little groups so girls can kind of congregate and develop their friendships and socialize. And so I think it's really changed the way we look at our environment, as well as looking at the whole child, the social emotional development. And it's really crucial in early childhood because we are the foundation. We set that foundation for later learning. So if we can teach children self-regulation and teach them the skills that they need in their further formal education, then they are ahead of the game. Teaching them mindfulness. We do breathing buddies where the kids lay down on the carpet and they have a little Beanie Baby and they watch the Beanie Baby as they breathe and as they close their eyes and as they meditate. And it really is a calming effect. And we use this on a daily basis in our classrooms and we can really see a change in the kids. Here's a perfect example. Here's a story. After the first week, one of the teachers was doing the breathing buddies with the children, really trying to help them self-regulate and calm themselves down and teaching them these skills. And a little boy was outside and he was in an argument with one of his friends and he was really upset. Well, he ran over to the teacher and said, I need the Beanie Baby, I need the Beanie Baby. And he actually laid down on the grass, put the Beanie Baby on his chest and just started breathing and watching the Beanie Baby go up and down. And really, it was a skill that he learned only a few days prior to that. But he remembered in that moment, I'm upset, I'm mad, but I need to figure out how to calm myself down. And he went and used the skill that he was taught. And that's something through the Goering Institute that we learned that the social and emotional development is crucial in children. And we've seen so many sad stories lately here in Arizona with boys who have tried to hurt themselves and commit suicide. And they didn't have these opportunities, or maybe they did. They just didn't have the support they needed. And I think starting and getting the word out at the youngest age and continuing through our educational system is crucial. And Katie and I, talked about how important it is to reach the educators. And I have to commend Veronica for bringing this to her school. My sons are in the Chandler School District and they don't have these opportunities. And I really hope that other school districts here in Arizona jump on board and, start to realize that children need to learn these skills and need support in the classrooms.
Yeah, what it sounds like to me, and what I'm hearing both Veronica and Tricia say, and I can't wait to hear from Katie afterwards, is there's a balance between the education of the facilitators, of the teachers, to understand as they approach and facilitate in more of a mindful or peaceful manner. And what backs that up is understanding the neurobiology in development to give them some sort of structure. And if that's wrong, correct me on that. But what I don't understand clearly, Veronica, you talked about chairs that move and standing desks. Is this, I think they're great ideas, but what I wonder is this is this part of the part of the Grand Institute research that, I mean, where does that fit in? Because what I'm hearing is there's gender stuff, but then there's this other stuff for the whole class. So just
Well,
let me
I think if you go into a classroom not knowing this and not having wobble chairs, watch little boys. They're fidgeting, they're moving while they're working. While the teacher, especially when you've got the teacher doing direct instruction, boys are moving. And so they're fidgeting and really they're irritating each other. I mean, they're irritating the kids around them. So now we have these little wobble chairs and they're wiggling. So it's the wiggle is in their little bottoms. And so it takes that out and the focus. I mean, these are things, it's amazing. It's happening instantaneously. The next day, because Katie brought some wobble chairs with her to our training, they took them in the classrooms because those teachers had certain kids that they knew. And the teachers came to me by the end of the day and said, oh my God, what a difference it made, because all of a sudden he's getting his wiggles out and he's focusing. Rather than touching everything around him, he's got another way of wiggling. One of the big things too, I think was really cute is I have a first grade teacher and her sons are on my campus. And one of her little boys is in second grade. I think he's in second grade. But she said that she said every morning is a battle. It's, go get dressed, go brush your teeth and go get in the car. And she said every morning it's just trying to get him ready. It's just to get out the door is a battle. So the next day she took this in and she said to him, dress, teeth, and car. She said he's never moved so quickly. She said it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming him that it was nagging. They talk about nagging and it really was to that point where so many words, but when she just put it simply, and she's one of my teachers now that is so believes in it, and she wants more and more. But one of the other things I want to talk about too is the parenting piece, because you really have to get parents buy-in. Otherwise, they think you're crazy. And so when Katie came to speak, I purposely invited a few of my leading parents in to hear, so that they now can go and educate each other. Because if I try and get out there and do these things, we live in a traditional world. This is not how I did it. So we have to make sure that our parents are being educated as well. So we took that time. And so I had the parents, and Katie knows because she's been contacted. She's in regular communication with them because they are so excited about this. They see the impact as well. So bringing it to my campus is for the teachers and the parents. And so we're going to encourage as many parents to come in because it not just in the classroom, but this is at home. This is understanding our children in different ways. I wish that I had known this. My son, I literally say to him now, he's 29, and he'll just glaze over, and I'll say, I used too many words, didn't I? And he just laughs. But he was an athlete, and he had to move, and so he had to control himself in a classroom. And so I don't know that his learning was, and he had amazing teachers, but I think his learning would have been even, more had he been able to move and accepted for that. So I just think the parent piece is really important too. When we talk about kids, we have to make sure that parents understand that this is how their children learn and how different they are.
And I think too, to frame it maybe for the whole entire audience, the platform is really nature, nurture, culture. So nature, how are these brains wired? Nurture, now that we understand the neurobiology and the neuroscience behind the brains, how do we nurture those brains, how they learn best and how they need support best? And then the culture, not only the culture of where the student comes from, but the culture of the school. A lot of the work Veronica and I do is based around social justice and how we say to kids, report, report, report when bullying or harassment goes on. The typical things that happen in schools K through 12. The reality is trusted adults sometimes aren't trusted adults. Trusted adults sometimes don't follow through. So what is a kid to do? So the culture and the nurturance piece is really talking and training kids to start to advocate for themselves and for others. So our work is not only about practical teaching strategies in the classroom and getting that physical movement because we know the body needs it in order to engage the whole brain, but it's also about training teachers, administrators, and parents with how kids need their attachment needs met. You look at social media, you look at anything where they're trying to get those attachment needs met. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be liked, they want to be followed. So not only the physical movement in the classroom when they get wiggly is important, but also understanding, and this is one of my mom's lines, it's never about what it's about. So when a student's having a struggle in the classroom, what we're really missing is those attachment needs either aren't being met at home, aren't being met at school. So during that 7-hour day at school, how can we attune with each of the students? And these practical teaching strategies are the beginning of saying to a kiddo, I understand that you need to move right now, and that is totally okay with me. There's a standing desk back there. Go have, stand at it for 10, 15 minutes. Stand at it all day. As long as you're on task and engaged with us, that's okay with me, as opposed to don't touch this, don't touch that. Why are you talking? I'm sending you out because you were talking to another student. There's a need being met there. And sure, we want to hold kids accountable for off-task behavior and make sure that we're not allowing, those constant, frequent things to be happening. But a lot of what gets sent to the front office are two things: the need for physical movement and bonding with each other, and attachment needs where teacher, parent, administrator are not attuning with our students.
Katie, I am so glad that you bring up the issues surrounding attachment. That is actually one of the things that we have focused on quite a bit on this show, and that's something that I'm personally passionate about, being an attachment parent myself.
Mm-hmm.
The issue of attachment parenting and neurodevelopment are really connected. And so if a child, and everybody on this panel has talked about early childhood development. So if a child comes to a school and institution and has not formed a healthy attachment, that has indeed affected their neurobiology. Can you talk a little bit about how a school or an administrator or a teacher can support a child that has not developed a healthy attachment?
Well, the training has to start with the adults, and it can be even, a 1-hour overview of how do you get on that kid's radio frequency. I mean, I don't think adults, even in 2017, understand what the word trauma means, and trauma is different for everyone. It can be something as severe as neglect, abuse, sexual assault. It can be, for a kiddo, a divorce. That could be trauma. And so we use the word a lot, but we still are looking at our students with what's wrong with you. Why can't you sit in this desk and tend to task? And we don't have enough training as educators in neurobiology, in neuroscience. I, went to school from 1991 to 1994. I never really had much training in neuroscience that I didn't do on my own. My main focus was, how do I deliver this instruction? So when I started studying attachment and attunement and really understanding that no good thing, my best lesson, cannot get through to a kiddo unless I understand and meet him where he is. There's a difference between sympathy and empathy in the classroom. And certainly as a disciplinarian, if I don't give that brain time to de-escalate, and a kiddo with trauma or neglect or any sort of issue is going to go down what I call a super lane highway. And that amygdala is going to swell, and they're going to go straight for that alarm. Whereas we're looking at these, 15-year-old kids and thinking, where's your prefrontal cortex? Well, guess what? His brain's only half developed. So most of what landed in my office was not that the kid was defiant, was not that the kid was, quote, bad, was that we as adults really tied their hands with these codes of conduct and these things that didn't align with how bodies move, how brains are engaged, especially for adolescents. And we didn't take the time to get to know what was truly going on. It was, The referral's on my desk. I have a decision to make. I'll do a little bit of counseling, and then the consequence is given. So it's really about understanding the brains, the time, and then, like you said, how do you attune and meet those attachment needs?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Does anybody else on the panel want to talk about that before we?
I can talk a little bit about what we do in our early childhood classrooms. We do things called connection rituals with our children. So each day that each child comes into the classroom, we have what we call I love you rituals, that we will look at the children face to face, down on their level. They get to shake our hands. They can give us a high five. They can give us a hug for that morning. They can choose a little song to sing together. And not only do we, the teachers, have that connection ritual, but the children have songs each day that they do that helps them connect with each other and one another. And we do a lot of social development that teaches children about others' feelings, what does their face look like, what are they feeling, what are we feeling. We play games. So teaching them those emotions and the connection is huge in early childhood, and it's we do it throughout the day in our school, and at the end of the day when they're gone, they connect with the teacher and all their friends when they say goodbye. So just having that one-on-one connection for that attachment and attunement is incredibly important. And again, early childhood is the foundation. We teach it in early childhood, and hopefully it will last throughout their formal learning.
Well, and on top of that, our theme this year was superheroes. Every child needs a superhero. And so we did a whole thing on being a champion for a child, because truly all the research says if the child doesn't think you care, they are not going to learn. It doesn't matter how good you are at presenting material or teaching. If a child doesn't think you care, they will not learn from you. And so that is very significant on our campus, and we talk about it all the time. And as a science teacher, science was only a small part of what I taught, and it was about caring about kids. And I had 160 kids in a day, and I loved every one of them. And I always tell my teachers, you have to find a special place in your heart for every child. And there are times, Katie, you can think of them with me. There are kids that it's a hard one to find a special place in your heart for them, but you have to as a teacher. You have to show them you care. And that's the first step in teaching, in my mind. Without that, and every child, if I don't see that in my classrooms, there's going to be a long, courageous conversation with that teacher. But it's expected on this campus.
I actually am, this is amazing. I'm really, really impressed with the passion that goes into this. And this is all based on the Gurrian Institute training, I'm assuming, right? So there's mindfulness, there's understanding. Is there also any curriculum involved other than, say, the mindfulness portion that Tricia mentioned earlier, and some of the ways and means that you're delivering information? Can you talk a little bit about, is there curriculum, or am I completely off?
There's no set curriculum. We actually use what the teachers are already using. It doesn't matter if I'm in Tennessee, California, Montana. But it's more about intentional physical movement in the classroom, and then using the teacher's own creative genius or parents' own creative genius, and just really teaching them about the brain itself. And then, okay, here's your kiddo, here's the brain. This is how he attunes best. And really paying attention to the messages that we send kids intentionally or unintentionally. Simple things like when an escalated kid comes home or is engaged in homework, a really easy strategy to bring an escalated brain down is water. Water will immediately dissipate cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And what we do as teachers and administrators is we chronically stress brains when we say to them, tell me what happened, look at me, and I need you to write down what happened. And we don't give time for that brain to come down to a level where they can get to that prefrontal cortex to tell us what happened.
Okay, so this to me is really fascinating, because if there is not a set curriculum, there's just a manner and means to understand the student-learning relationship. then is there ever an opportunity to go into a classroom where you're trying to apply these concepts and theories where the curriculum and the manner in which the curriculum is being delivered is absolutely not going to work?
I have not seen a classroom where it wouldn't work. I've seen teachers say, I'm not sure I can buy into this. That's not my style of teaching. I'm not comfortable. A lot of secondary teachers, especially high school teachers, are content experts. I'm here to teach AP chemistry, right? And I was a high school teacher, so I was one of them. But you can't afford not to get them up and moving. You can't afford not to have them interface. You can't afford not to develop social emotional skills that are bleeding out of your curriculum, whether it's science or French. What's happening is we're losing our students, even our high achievers, to boredom and, not enriching curriculum with these things that they need to buffer the social emotional support. So I have had teachers say, I'm afraid if I get my students up and moving, I won't get them back down. And my argument to that, or my pushback to that, would be, I'd love for you to try 3 strategies over the next month and then come back and tell me how it went. And by and large, they say, you know what, I tried it and they did much better than I thought they would. It's definitely structure before strategies. You can't just go in and say, okay, kids, we're going to be up and moving all day long. It's definitely policy procedure based, and you have to have that structure before you try to implement the strategies, and then hold yourself accountable for the strategies as well.
Okay, thank you so much for clearing that up. So
Sure.
I've got a better understanding now. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to watch a video which really talks about voice and discipline and differentiating the two, or the relationship between the two. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes, and we're going to continue the conversation when we get back.
And extrapolate that to a 9-year-old boy or a 10-year-old boy who accidentally hits his knee here, and a 10-year-old girl. Who is more likely to hit the table? The 10-year-old boy or the 10-year-old girl? Boy. Would a girl do it? Sure. These are not, yeah, absolutely, go for it, hit the table. But you're going to tend to find more boys are going to do it. Some interesting reasons. And all of these things, remember, you could just say, I think it's because males were socialized to hit the table. It works, but let me give you another possibility too. When males and females get upset, so when we're under stress, and if you haven't checked this out, Tracy, there's a number of people who have done this research, but Tracy Shores at Rutgers is someone that I know well because we're friends. She's done a lot of this research on male-female stress difference. So when males get under stress and females get under stress, what hormone shoots up for males, do you think? Testosterone. Yeah, I heard someone say it. Okay, so males get under stress, their testosterone goes up. Testosterone is an aggression chemical. In adolescence, and later it'll become a sex chemical, but it's an aggression chemical in general. For females, oxytocin goes up. And I'm always curious, how many people have heard of oxytocin? Okay. So, and some of you have not. It's fascinating, and if you are raising girls, I would beg you to get The Wonder of Girls. That has a lot on this, because it has a lot to do with girls. Now, we each have each other's hormones, of course, so everyone is each other. However, this is kind of an interesting irony about human life and human nature, that when I, as a male, get under stress, the cortisol level rises, right? That's my stress hormone. That's going to trigger adrenaline. All sorts of things will be triggered. But follow this path, adrenaline gets triggered, and then testosterone gets triggered. So I move toward a fight or flight response, because testosterone gets triggered. She's under stress. Gail, my wife, is under stress, or any of you here, female here, you get under stress. Your oxytocin shoots up. Your cortisol gets hit, then your adrenaline, then your oxytocin shoots up. Oxytocin is a bonding chemical. So you have an aggression chemical in your boys going up and in men, and you have a bonding chemical in your girls going up in women. That's actually a pretty profound difference. And I think it's one of the reasons you see this, that when females get under stress, they tend to move through it. They tend to try to find what's going on quite often more quickly if it's simple like this, and then they reach out, right? They tend to reach to someone. They reach into their bonding system. When they're really young, they cry. Later, they'll talk. Can they go into a flight mode? Sure. Can they get depressed and pull away and just stay in bed all day? Sure. But I'm not talking about a clinical condition. I'm not talking about depression. I'm talking about everyday interactions that create stress. Females will tend to try to bond more to solve the stress. Males will tend to go into fight or flight mode. Now, males, by the way, are bonding, but we tend to bond through systems. We create groups, and we bond in those groups. We don't tend to bond verbal emotive as much. And we don't tend to reach into our bonding systems as quickly. So I would say that's another thing that's going on here with girls. And so there's an incredible functionality to that. And so it's really not about giving up. It's pretty functional to do it that way. Now, let's say we're working with girls, a couple wonderful clues for us. If we're working with girls and we're saying to ourselves, well, what would we learn, for instance, from a guy who's pulling on a string? We could teach something to girls. I showed this to my girls as they were growing up, and I asked them, so what would we learn from this? And the second one got it because I had already said it to the first one 3 years before. There is an advantage to pulling on a string and not stopping. And the advantage is inventiveness and innovation. Because if you think about it, how do things get invented? They actually don't necessarily get invented by processing a lot and then saying, well, I'm gonna reach into the bonding system and I'd like it all to be set up the way I'd like it to be set up, and I really care a lot about how it looks. And right, you have to just keep doing it and fail 50 times or 100 times. So you have to keep pulling on the string and it doesn't work, and then you have to keep pulling on the string and it doesn't work, and then you pull on the string and the 51st time that you pull on that string and fail, the 51st time you invent the new operating system. Right? So that's something we actually can help our girls with. Because a lot of girls, part of oxytocin is I want to please, right? I want the relational systems to be stable. Now, if I hate this person, I'll certainly do something to deceive the relational system when I'm somewhere else. But right now I'd like it to be stable, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on making it stable. That might mean we don't take as much risk. Whereas guys who don't spend as much time making the relational system stable, they're not processing as much of it, they might feel freer to make more mistakes and they might invent more.
So we hope that you've enjoyed that video, and it should give you a little bit of insight behind the philosophy of the Gurian Institute. And we're going to explore what discipline looks like in schools, in classrooms, but coming from the point of view of the Gurian philosophy. Tricia, why don't we go to you first? We'll start with early childhood development, and because that sets the foundation. If a child is going through a school that is running with this philosophy, what does that look like from the Gurian perspective and from the perspective of you in your classroom or in your school?
Yes, well, first off, I think Veronica touched on this, that discipline is teaching, and definitely in early childhood, this is the first situation that they're usually in a group of others than just their family, so they're with friends, and young children are very egocentric, and they want what they want when they want it. And we really teach the children how to express themselves, use their language without giving them too many words, but very simple words, very if somebody took their toy, say to them, I want that back. I want my toy back. So we give them the language. We teach them to breathe if they're frustrated or angry or in their brainstem, which is kind of the fight and flight. We teach them, let's breathe. Let's do some of that mindful breathing to get you back up to kind of the frontal cortex to where you can kind of rationalize and think about it and kind of discuss it and say, give me my toy back instead of punching your friends. So we give them specific directions and teach them exactly how to handle situations and problem solve. And it's amazing. We teach them, simple things that help and support them again, throughout their education. And we don't do timeout. Timeout doesn't really teach a child anything. We can, remove them from the situation and, say, well, why don't you go over here? Why don't you go over here? And then we'll come together and talk about it and resolve it. But timeout is just removing them from the situation and making them sit down, and it doesn't teach them anything. So everything that we do, we want to teach them how to problem solve and support themselves and assert themselves when they need to. So that's the direction we go in our program.
Tricia, can you talk a little bit, since the Gurren Institute is based on the foundation of nurture, nature, and culture, talked about the nurture and the nature. Can you talk about the culture from your institution? What does that look like? What are the principles of that culture that you're expressing?
Yep. Well, our culture would be, we use kind words, gentle touches, and support of others in our classroom. And that's something we say each day, that they start in our toddler program very young. They don't really understand what that is, but as they grow throughout the years, they understand that. So it's something that we want to instill in children, that it's important to be kind to others, to be respectful of others. They don't really know what that means, and to support your friends and your environment. So that would be a culture that we support in our school, not only for the children, but for our parents as well as our teachers. And we teach this program to our parents when they first come into our school, so we can bridge that gap with the school and with their home life.
So in more of, we're K-5 at this school, pre-K through 5th grade. And ours is a very positive. Ours is a, even the worst behaviors are based on reward systems. And so in the classroom, we have these clip charts that are all colorized, and you clip up. You can clip down if you've misbehaved, but what we talk about is when they do misbehave, you find someone around them that's behaving, and you check that, you clip that one up. So it's that role modeling of good behavior. So you stay in a very positive way, and that truly helps. Again, not being punitive, talking about making mistakes. We talk to kids all the time. Now, I do tell kids, now if you've made a mistake, and if you make that mistake again, it's a choice. You've now made a choice, and it'll be a different conversation. Again, we're talking 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in talking to them like that. And so they know that I have that relationship, but also when you're disciplining, I think so important that when they're in my office, they know I care. Even when they're in trouble, they know I care. So when I go in that lunchroom, they're coming up to me and telling me, Mrs. Lieber, I turned it around. I had a great rest of the day. And so I think it's really important, again, that piece where you care about them and you care about them learning something from it. With the clip chart, it clips up. You can clip down, but you can also clip back up. So it's not an end. And again, with behavioral plans, it's always just small segments of the day so they feel success. There's nothing, I've had kids turn around. Some of my worst kids turn them around by going away from punitive and turning to the positive and the teaching part of learning to deal with it. And so I think that's what's important. And again, you were talking about the difference in boys and girls. When I have girls in trouble, it's usually more of that mean girl. We talk about girls, they hurt your heart. Boys hit each other and they get it over with. Girls hurt your heart. And so girls need to talk it out. I find when I'm in my office, they have to talk to each other, and there has to be some tears now and then in the worst situations, but they have to talk it out. Whereas boys, they just want it over with. They want to know that they did wrong, and let's talk about what they did. They want to tell you what they did. They're going to tell you what they're going to do next time, and they're ready to be over with. So it's having those conversations with kids in what best fits the situation.
I just want to expand a little bit on two things that you said. The first one was, you said that you received feedback from a student that said, hey, teacher, I turned it around. What does that mean? And is that an option, the turnaround, I'm using the terminology that you use, is that an option that you gave to them as a potential solution, or is that something that they came up themselves? Can you talk a little bit about
No,
that?
they know when I'm in here and they've done something, I'll say, you know what, I'm going to come in the lunchroom today because I love being in the lunchroom in their natural habitat, I say, and going into the lunchroom with them, and I'll tell them I'm going to be in the lunchroom and I want to hear that your day got better, that you turned it around, that things improved. And they'll come up to me and tell me that. And I'll say, well, and if I ask your teacher, will she say the same? And they're honest with me. And so, yeah, I want them to give me a hug. I want them knowing that they were in trouble in the morning and they were in my office in the morning, but by the time we get to lunch, they're coming up and giving me a hug. I don't want them to fear me at all. There shouldn't be a fear. It should be a respect and knowing that I care. I care that they're going to do better. Just like my own kids. I want them to learn from their mistakes. And hopefully they're not big mistakes. They're just little mistakes and they learn. And that's what we do in education. We're teaching in every way. It's not just, like I said, not just academics. They're learning all day long.
Thank you for that. The second follow-up question that I had for you, Veronica, was you also mentioned that you use a system of rewards. Can you talk about what that looks like in a classroom?
Well, the behavioral plan, everybody starts their day, and it just kind of goes along with the brain. It's a clip chart of colors. And so they start on green, and that's ready to learn. And if you end your day on green, you've had a great day. But you can clip up to amazing and outstanding and awesome or whatever it is. So it's like a pink and blue and purple. And then if you clip up past purple, if you've gone above and beyond, you clip to the principal. So you walk into my office and you clip. And so I walk around most days with about 5 to 10 clothespins on me with their names on them. And all the kids want to run up and say, who was that? Who is that? And it's just that sign of somebody's had a really great day. And then the next day I announce they're the star performer on campus because, and then they come back up and they get their award and they get a pencil for the day. So it's really honoring that good behavior. But also when you have kids that are on behavioral plans to a point where we're keeping track of behavioral plans and working with parents that they get rewards. It's those small positive rewards that they get. You can't have it being a huge amount of your day. It has to be every, break the day into so many parts so that they feel success throughout the day. But always knowing that clip chart, if the kid's doing something amazing in class, the teacher right off, Johnny, run up and go clip up. And everybody stops and looks and knows, oh, wow, that's what we do to, for great behavior. So just changing that mentality of everything being more of and again, it's an intrinsic, because the most they get out of it is a pencil the next day. It's nothing big for our basic behavioral plans on campus.
You just said it's intrinsic, though.
It has to be. It has to be. We can't keep giving kids things. We don't do that. It has to be a belief in yourself. We have to make them think, build that confidence in themselves.
I understand that, but it's an extrinsic system, though. I wouldn't say it's always intrinsic in
Right.
that. But yeah, I just want to make that differentiation. So Katie, I know you're brimming. So
We missed you.
Jump in.
Sorry. Yes, I've moved locations. Better Wi-Fi. So that has been my greatest learning is between behavior charts, behavior plans, clipping, all of those things that we've done for years. I think my greatest learning coming to the Gurning Institute and getting the training is back to the essential need for reparation, and that as trusted adults, what we say to kids is, if you do XYZ, you'll get XYZ from me. Or if you do XYZ, you'll be recognized for XYZ, right? As opposed to looking at a whole class of students with a whole bunch of different needs. My frequent flyers that I saw every single day, sometimes at least weekly, if not every day, they were looking for a gain in relationship. My most intense students where I missed out on them was not seeing the intensity as an opportunity to turn that intensity into leadership. And I think that's where most schools are missing the mark with our really high needs kiddos. I don't care if you're in a Title I school or the most affluent, and I was in both, and I was in the most affluent for longer than I was in the Title I setting. Needs are very different, but also very similar in the sense of they got labeled. They got labeled by a color. They got labeled by a behavior chart. They got labeled the frequency they were coming to see me for discipline, and where I missed out and did a disservice to students. And again, mostly boys, but some girls, was not recognizing and allowing time for reparation of our relationship with each other, time for them to interface with the teacher they were having an issue with, and really just time in general. We were so forced on efficiency. You have 8 referrals on your desk. By the end of the day, all those parents need to know what he or she did wrong, what the consequence was, and what we're going to do with them the next day, as opposed to really looking at what's going on with this kiddo, from brains to learning disabilities to true, as you said, intrinsic motivators that would allow the kid to kind of let us meet him where he was at. This new rage of growth mindset, looking at a 20 out of 20 and he got +2, -18. Well, +2, fills your bucket up. -18 sucks all the life out of you. And so we wonder why kiddos in first and second grade start to lose motivation. And then we see behaviors that we label as off task or defiant.
I'd actually like to talk about off-task or defiant classification.
Sure.
Within the off-task, we're talking about a child who may be interested in reading, or when it's not time to read, which was the case of my son. He was always done with his classwork beforehand, and he got sent to the office because he'd read a book instead of helping somebody else. I mean, those were his discipline issues. But off-task really is a system of control that may or may not be natural to that child or even work with that child. How do you differentiate between a behavioral problem and the system itself just failing the child?
Well, I think that's where Dr. Graham started his research and continues, because he talks about it's the systems. It's not that we don't have good, well-intentioned adults and kiddos. It's that the systems actually tie the hands of the people that are working in them. And so, like you said, a student that likes to read, that's not an off-task behavior. Even a tapping pencil or a tapping knee, a fidget, that is actually a student trying to get his brain out of the neural resting state and back into engagement. But we, typically as females, read that as off-task behavior. And then, as you said, the trajectory of that student's career in school, starting as young as kindergarten. If our boys are being referred to the front office 5-1 over our girls in preschool, you can imagine what that student looks like in 4th grade, in 8th grade, and if he makes it to 12th grade. You can imagine just the spirit of that child being stifled. And so, our strategies really speak to, like you said, what is off-task behavior? What does that brain need? Does it need a higher level of enrichment? Does it need remediation? Does it need some free play? We know bodies need to move, but even in 2017, we still have lots and lots of students that get no movement throughout the day, or no, like you said, opportunity to read a book. I mean, how fantastic that he wanted to engage in reading when we have a lot of students that have no interest in reading at all.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was just pointing out the individual needs are generally overlooked as being off task if they're not fulfilling what the structure is for that day. But before we move away from everything that you just said, I want to touch on something that you just talked about, free play. I've done many shows on free play and have interviewed lots and lots of experts on the evolution of play and how that's detrimental to a brain's development, and how that, through every type of animal, human. It's absolutely necessary to our development. But we see within the structure of schools that free play is the thing that's getting knocked out, and not there's not time for free play. How do you address the need for free play in a school setting? And what do you think from the Green Institute's perspective? How much time is needed for free play in order to really give the brain what it needs?
Well, I can only speak for Arizona, but we're moving towards legislation of 50 minutes of free play, unstructured free play throughout the school day. We have a variety of different structures right now. Some schools have only 20 minutes per day. Some have the 50 minutes. Some have 15 minutes for lunch and 20 minutes of free play. I would also speak to, within the free play, adults not intervening, allowing true free play to be free play. What's happening is some of these boys and girls are being reprimanded for becoming too aggressive or too rough during the only time that they're getting to move their bodies. And so it's really important, like you said, I mean, our platform speaks directly to bodies need to move. This is how boys and girls bond with each other. When we take those opportunities away, you as a trusted adult cannot look at your classroom and think, they're having some issues within the classroom, when you've restricted a true human need and elements, all the way around, from friendship to bonding to just the physical piece and physiology of the body moving.
I want to actually follow up with Trisha. How much free play do you utilize in your school?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I'm in a very developmental program, and I get to write the curriculum, and our curriculum is play. Our children learn through play all day long. They're up and moving. They don't have self-directed lessons. It's facilitated by their interest, what they're interested in, and we move through their own information that they want to learn. And we do have curriculum. We follow at our school the Reggio Emilia curriculum, which is based out of Italy. And so it is a very holistic, natural environment. And I'm very, very fortunate because I'm in a program that can allow that. And our children are up and moving all day long. Our children get to rough and tumble play. The boys and girls get to wrestle each other, pull each other down to the ground, roll around in the grass. They learn self-regulation through those activities. We do have guidelines. We say if it's unsafe and you don't feel safe, say stop. And they learn to say stop, and then they'll regather themselves. They have to ask the other child do you want to play rough and tumble? And the children, girls and boys, both play rough and tumble. And so I'm very fortunate to be able to allow that. And I do a lot of teaching our parents and other education teachers and administrators on the importance of play and what young children learn through play. So I'm a huge advocate of play, and I think that not only in early childhood, elementary kids, high school kids need to be able to play. I have a son that just turned 18, and he'll be a senior next year. And when I ask him, what was your favorite part of your day today? Lunch, because that's when he gets to play with his friends. I mean, it's high school play, but that's the part that's important to him. So it's for adults need play too. We all need to be able to have that play, and we definitely do learn through all that sensory hand-on learning.
Well, and it's a little more difficult, especially with, standards and testing and all that we have to do, but I'm definitely very open. We are really open to have kids play. So kinder first and second, they do their learning, and it's a lot of centers approach. So kids are self-directed. They're moving around the room, and they're, grouped a little bit. They're given some choices. So the kids are up and moving even in the mornings when they're learning. Kinder is on the floor. They do their calendar, then they go to their centers, but they're breaking it up. And then we always have a morning recess, about 15 minutes. Sometimes it goes to 20, but again, just free play. Kids go out and teachers are watching. And so given that opportunity, then they come back in, you do some more learning, and then go to lunch, and you have recess at lunch. And then we come back, and there's usually, well, there is a recess later on. You know, I say to them, if you're an adult, I know when I'm sitting in a training, you can't sit there hour on, you're not learning. You've lost them anyway, so get the blood flowing, get them out there. We then, third grade, they do a recess in the morning, and from time to time, they gauge from their kids because they feel that they can sit a little bit longer, but there's there's a lot of movement in my classrooms. There's a lot of centers approach and kids talking to each other, and that's part of it too, is that kids are having the accountable talk, and they learn how to talk to each other and talk about their learning and do their own learning. And then in my 4th and 5th grade classrooms, we departmentalize. So the kids have different teachers, so they're moving. So they every 45 minutes they're up and they're moving. And we really, truly, the teachers on my campus understand the need for movement. And so again, we can't do it to the level, of a preschool, but again, we move a lot, and the kids. And so when I hear that the legislation for our state, and I know Katie went and spoke to our legislators about it, fighting, we see the importance of it here, and we already do it. So everyone's, I hear principals panic about learning time. You know what? Your kids aren't learning if their blood isn't flowing, and they're not learning anyway. So get that blood flowing, get them moving, give them that chance of free play, and you're going to get more out of them. So
I think too, part of our platform and free play speaks to what Dr. Gurian has termed aggression nurturance. And I think this for me was a huge shift in learning about what he meant by that. And so he defines aggression with a couple different words. Some of them, some people take a little bit differently than others, but he describes aggression as control, manipulate, and exploit. So when kids are working in groups and they're, doing play, they're essentially trying to control and manipulate the ball or each other. And sometimes they're exploiting each other in the sense of, get up, we need you. So part of what happens in free play is some amazing, profound success for some kiddos, like I said, that may not have success in the classroom on the, field hockey field or lacrosse field or the soccer or dodgeball, whatever they're playing. That's their opportunity to shine. And so what's happening in a lot of our schools, especially upper elementary and middle schools, is teachers, administrators are reading typical boy play to be too aggressive in nature. And not allowing those opportunities and intervening too soon out of fear that parents are going to get mad or it's unsafe. And certainly we need to adhere to safety policies and make sure that kids aren't hurting each other. But at the same time, if you dial back to when we had free play, certainly there weren't so many fears. And I think, 10, 15 years ago, we had this oversweeping, thing happen in America where everything was bullying, everything's harassment. And I'll just give you a really quick example. A boy in a PE classroom, there's 40 kids with lacrosse sticks in their hands. The teacher's teaching them lacrosse skills. One kid bops the other with the lacrosse stick on his head, gets sent out of class, gets sent to my office. He's heated. He's got adrenaline going. He's stressed because he's now in trouble. He's got testosterone going. And of course, here I am receiving him as a female administrator saying, tell me what happened. Tell me with your words what happened. And he's, so high and escalated that he's like, I don't even know, and we're talking to a brain that's only half developed. He really truly didn't know. To him, bopping a kid on the head with a lacrosse stick playfully was not violence. It was not a demerit. It was not a violation of the code of conduct. He was joking around with his friend, and that's part of their bonding process. So when I do trainings, we talk. What is your definition as a faculty of, aggression, healthy aggression, if there is such a thing, and violence? And as a faculty, is there some wiggle room for boys and girls to be able to do that high five in the hallway and not get in trouble, to elbow each other as a, jokingly and bonding with each other? Where do you as a faculty sit? Because what happens is, in PE, the kid gets thrown out, but in the hallway, his track coach who teaches social studies, like totally fine with, that aggressive high five. So some really mixed messages, especially in our upper elementary and middle school and high school. Boys especially get condemned for doing things that are innately boy, that if trained adults would be like, that's not totally in my comfort zone, but he's not hurting anyone, and it's truly not a violation of our code of conduct, because that right there labels kiddos and sends them on a disciplinary trajectory that can ultimately end in very unsuccessful school careers, because once they lose the joy of bonding, then their motivation in the classroom sometimes suffers as well.
Yeah, I can see how this would be a very tricky terrain to navigate. And as you talked about, each school has their own culture and rules surrounding these sorts of interactions. Before we move too far from this topic and this circumstance, I really want to address adolescence. There are different brain development stages in adolescence, very different than any other time in a human being's life. There's a higher chance of risk-taking during this time, and also the social impact and the social development has more value to the adolescent. Can you talk a little bit about the stance that the Green Institute takes as they address the adolescent brain development?
Well, I would say most of our trainings, middle and high school level teachers really focus a large chunk of the 8-hour training. Probably 4 hours is spent on exactly what you're talking about, and is directly related to some of the things that they're involved with. Video games and social media with the dopamine and reward center, as you alluded to there. So not only in-person interactions that they're having where they're making impulsive, risky decisions that don't seem to make sense to adults, even though we did those things too, just dialing back to your own adolescence and pointing out to them, this is the structure of the brain. This is what we're pruning. This is what we want to hone. I get a lot of calls, and I mean daily calls, about social media and video games, how much screen time, what impact. This is what he said and posted and got in trouble for. He sent an image of himself, et cetera, et cetera. And my standard line is, yep. Because it doesn't surprise me at all that a boy spends 4 or 5 hours on a video game and gets addicted to it. He's getting a huge chemical rush. He's moving objects through space. He's honing that logical, mathematical, and spatial intelligence that is probably a strength for him already. But what we're missing is that verbal emotive out of him, that if left online for 4 or 5 hours, yeah, that reward center is trumping good parenting and good teaching anytime. And so I think it's really, I am still fascinated when I get the calls, and I've had friends say, well, Katie, you have to understand, you've been around teenagers for the last 24 years. The last time I was a teenager was 25, 30 years ago. And I want to forget that time in my life. And so, like you said, the training for parents especially has to be the understanding of the brain, the understanding of the dopamine and that reward center that, again, is going to override any sound, rational judgment, and really just pointing out to them, you're looking at a teen girl at age 11 is half developed. A teen boy at age 15 is halfway through development of their brain. So that means that those rational, sound decisions are going to happen much later. And so consequences and boundaries and accountability and those courageous conversations we have with them have to align with meeting them where they're at.
Can you talk about how you do that?
I think it goes back to that listening. We talk way too much, and we don't do a whole lot of listening. And I find a lot of parents, although they may be with it, they're not current and relevant in what's going on in their kiddo's life. They don't understand social media. They give devices without understanding the impact. They don't really understand the culture and the explicit nature of things that their students are exposed to. And they don't, knowingly or unknowingly, they don't engage in the way their student needs them to be engaged. And it's just really taking the time to get to know how your kiddo is wired. You know them best, but you may not know their social group best. You may not know the nuances of that group. The best advice is really, if you do a carpool, you can find out. You're like the CIA. You get more information on a carpool by pretending you're driving the car and just listening to the radio than you can get, face to face sometimes with your student. And so just simple ways to engage with your kid and understand and listen, watch their movies, listen to their music, be current and relevant in their needs and wants. And I think Trish could probably, and Veronica, since they've have teenagers and had teenagers, can speak to that as well.
Yeah, well, I can say from my own personal experience, I know that when my son wants to come talk to me, again, I have one son that's a very, very male brain, my older son, and he doesn't want me to solve problems. He wants me to listen to him. And he's very black and white, so he gives me very specific, very choppy words and sentences, and I listen. And I used to try to solve his problems until I went to the Gurian and learned more about what boys need. And then I just sit there and I say, I empathize with them and I say, yeah, that sounds very difficult. What do you think you should do about it? Or so I use those open-ended questions and allow him to problem solve himself. Now, he may say sometimes, Mom, I don't know. I want you to help me, and I will be there to help him. But really just listen to him. And I have learned, because of the Gurian and Katie, to keep on top of all social media so I know what's going on. And I know that the apps that are unsafe, the apps that are safer. I do phone checks with my sons and I make sure that I know what's happening in their lives. I do trust them and I want to give them some autonomy, but also I want to know what's going on. Our world is a different world. There's things out there that we didn't see when we were children. And, once our kids see things, they can't unsee it. And so it's our job to make sure that we really are on top of what's going on in their lives. And I'm an older mom, but I try to stay current. I try to stay hip. I listen to their music. I try to do the things to stay current with them. So I know what's going on. And they think I'm the cool mom, but they know also that I set boundaries and limits as well. But so I think it's just important, like Katie said, to listen to them and empathize with them and don't always try to solve all their problems and trust them.
I guess I wish I had known this. Like I said, my son's 29. My daughter's 25. We talk every day. It's a whole different world. My son's 29, and he is textbook Gurian. I, again, tried to help him solve his problem. I wish I had just listened. I think the thing that saved him, he's doing great, but I think what was important, and I try and get these to parents my son didn't have video games growing up. They were out there, but I never let him in the house. He actually didn't do video games until he was old enough to be able to buy him himself. I think what was important is he played in a sport, and he could get that energy out. He was a competitive baseball player, and baseball was every night. And so I just think it's so important. It doesn't have to be, a sport, but just being outside. And I'm lucky. I still live I've been in the same house for 30 years. I live in a neighborhood where they come in when the street light, it didn't even exist. I didn't have to do play dates. My kids ran the neighborhood. We had great friends. I knew where they were at all times. And so he had that play. And I was not real strict about homework is now. And that's what we do too. We make our kids come home and this is the scheduled time for your homework. Kids kind of need to, as long as they're getting it done, as long as my kids did their homework, they could do it whenever they wanted. And so giving them that time and that place, they could do it where they wanted. And that was the agreement we had. As long as you do it and your grades are up, you can do it when and where you want, and giving them that freedom. But I think it's so important for kids that, again, the video games scare me. As a principal, I see it every day. It's heartbreaking to see that they're going home and spending hours, and you can see it's training their brain in a wrong direction. But I think it's so important that you do see a difference in those kids where they're still in those competitive sports or they're in some activity after school where they're moving and running, and learning to compete and learning to deal with their I hate to say aggression, but aggression. My kids' soccer's big on my campus, and I have little boys that are sent to the office because they were, kicking and hitting each other. And by the time they get to me, I really want to say to the neonates, really? They're competing and kids get hurt. And I feel it, sometimes when you compete, you get hurt. And it's having the boys sit down and talk to each other. I rarely say much when I'm dealing with that. And one of my things is, are you friends? Yeah. Did you mean to hurt him? No. And unless it's an absolute code of conduct for me and they've absolutely maliciously done something, oh, well, you learned, don't do it again. And maybe not, don't be so raw. We talk about that. And they come up with their own solutions to how we can do this without hurting each other. So I think I have a low, they pull discipline records every year, and I've got some of the lowest on my campus. Do I think it's because my kids are less? No, I think it's because I have more tolerance, and I see that kids compete and get hurt with, playing out there. So I think it's just a different world. But when Katie says the video games, those scare me. They really do scare me when I see kids being babysat by them.
Is there an official position in terms of video games from the Gerson Institute? Is that something that's even addressed? Katie, you're muted.
Yes, digital citizenship is kind of the, new buzzword for it. But, Dr. Gurin's position on it is no cell phones before the age of 11 or 12, limited screen time, absolutely none right before bed, getting them off 2 to 4 hours prior to bedtime, and pointing out during our trainings what goes on chemically in the brain when the screen time is present, what happens when there's conflict on screen time close to bedtime. We're seeing a lot of young girls, having negative rumination loops that are producing anxiety, depression, self-harm, something as simple as a group text where they were excluded or a bad word was said about them, and then the sleep is affected. Obviously, they're plugged in almost all night, some of them, phones under their pillows, computers in their bedrooms. So just really, teaching parents and students about, okay, this is a tool to use. The unfortunate piece is there's no comprehensive curriculum that's teaching them how to use it for good. We're teaching students all day long about don't do this, don't do that, this is bad, too much screen time, but we're not saying to them, this is a great tool in order to brand yourself, market yourself, and kind of build an online presence and a digital footprint that is, something responsible. And so we're getting there, and that's part of the training that we do within our Gurin, platform training itself. But the position is limited screen time. We do show a scan of the cortical cortex and what it looks like when a student is online 4 to 5 hours, and you can see that the cortical cortex starts to look a lot like Swiss cheese when there's too much screen time going on. And unfortunately, I just see a lot of parents just not being educated themselves on what's out there, and then almost shaming and condemning their student when they stumble onto something inappropriate at age 9 or 10, and then not really sure how to handle that.
From the Gerson Institute perspective, are you sort of putting together all social interactions and video game playing and YouTube watching together as the chunk of screen time, or do you differentiate between what they're doing? Because I know students do homework on their computers. Is that part of screen time?
Well, it's a slippery slope, because what upper administration is saying is, here's this awesome technology, and the expectation is you need to use it in your classroom each class period. The school I was at most recently, they gave every 7th and 8th grader a laptop with 0 training. And the expectation from the upper administration was the teachers use it each class period. So you have kids using their devices before school, the laptop every class period, their devices at lunch, their devices after. I mean, it's literally all day long, right? So when we talk about screen time, we're talking about in totality of the day, both academically and otherwise. that should be limited, and there should be a good, healthy balance of embracing technology and using it as a tool. And then what are we doing at night 4 or 5 hours? I know all of the apps that are out there currently. I can't say that many of them are useful and and the kids don't, if they are useful, the kids aren't really sure how to use them for good. They're still kind of waiting in the abyss of, this is how I connect, but the connections are false. There's a lot of emotional isolation going on.
So moving a little bit away from the concept of screen time, you did touch on something, Katie, about the social interaction. And when I asked my question about adolescent development, one of the key developmental stages or issues of importance during that stage is social groups and social development. It's escalated, it's amplified during adolescence, and sort of taking aside the group chat situation that you mentioned, can you talk a little bit about what girls need from a social development standpoint when they start moving through adolescence?
Well, I think, a lot of moms and dads get worried. Dads typically, and I'm making like a sweeping statement here, but I love dads. What typically happens in conflict is they will say, oh, you're overreacting, walk away, ignore her. The need to be needed is what girls need. They love that bonding. They bond with oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical, right? And so lots and lots of words get said. And what they're really looking, they come like this and then they bounce off, right? So the exclusion and that control and manipulation, that's all really developmentally, like you said, pretty normal. Is it appropriate? Not sometimes. But what they really need from each other is how to establish boundaries. And if mom and dad aren't teaching it, or they don't have a good mentor, what they're looking for from others is, how do I set a boundary with another girl? And a lot of them aren't learning those coping and resiliency skills at this age that they can use later in life. And when we look at boys, 30% of boys 18 to 34 are living at home. I live in a pretty upper middle class community where we have high achieving students leaving school with 22 dual credits, and they go 1 year to college and they come home. And, you look at the book, How to Raise an Adult. She talks about being the dean at Stanford and these kids coming to Stanford and being so low in their coping and resiliency skills that they had to go home. So the friendships and that social interaction that adolescents need is, I want to be liked, I want to be needed, I want to be followed. And so part of what the group is doing is figuring out who I am, where my psyche lies, where my, my self-concept. And unfortunately for parents, kids you can't outperform your self-concept. And so you can, say you're great at this and you're beautiful and blah, blah, blah. But if a kiddo doesn't feel it inside and it's not intrinsic, like you said, then it kind of falls on deaf ears.
Yeah, and I was wondering also if Tricia or Veronica, you want to talk a little bit about the role social development plays as you apply the Gerson Institute philosophy in your institutions, your schools.
Okay, you want to go, Veronica?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, of course, everyone needs to feel like they belong. And, but we also want to teach children to feel supported within, feel it intrinsically, like we said, and feel like they can handle situations, they can handle social situations, they can work through it. And that's by setting those foundations of those social skills, of teaching children how to interact, how to problem solve, how to work through issues, and not always have adults step in. Of course, in early childhood, we have to guide them We have to support them and give them the language when they're young. But by the time they're 4 and 5, it's amazing at how these children are solving their own problems without the adults stepping in and telling them what to do. I sit back at my school and I watch the parents when there's conflict and they want to jump in and solve it. And I kind of say, hold on, give them a chance to work it out. And if they don't, we'll be there to support them. But usually they work it out much better than an adult would. And they figure it out and they go on their merry way. And we want to make sure that we're allowing children to have that ability and have those skills instead of parents and adults always stepping in and solving all their problems. Because in the world, we're not going to always be there. We're going to have to say, you go on to elementary school, you go on to junior high, you go on to high school. And hopefully we've given them the skills to move forward and feel confident and successful in solving those social issues and interactions.
And I think it's important in the classroom, like I said, if you have a child-centered classroom, they're going to have to learn to work together. We do a lot of pair shares and, like I said, centers and making choices. And so I think that's important. And we do this thing called accountable talk. We train it in the district. So we teach kids how to talk to each other within the classroom, in their lab groups or in their, and they don't get to choose their partners all the time. Sometimes they do, but the majority of the time you're working with someone that you didn't get to choose. So it's so important that it's a child-centered classroom. Not having the teacher with directed, the sage on the stage. You can't have that. Kids have got to do their own learning. The other thing that we do is we have we call them the buddy benches, and they say, but we bought them from a company, and they say buddy benches. And we have one at kinder, we have one at first and second, we have one at 3, 4, 5. And we've trained kids that if you don't want to play with who you're playing with, if you don't feel comfortable about yourself, you go sit on the buddy bench. And all the kids have been trained that if you see someone on the buddy bench, that's your cue to go grab them and bring them into your group. And it really, really works. It's like this big deal. And we tell them if you're on the buddy bench, you can't choose who you go to. You have to, whoever comes and gets you, you have to go with them. And so we had a trainer come in and everything. And it's amazing. Like I sat on the buddy bench once and all the kids came running to me. And I'm like, can I just sit down for a while? But so doing things like that and encourage that working together and bringing someone that wasn't in your group, bringing someone new in your group. And people come to my school and they worry when they're new. And I've had quite a few that were going to be new next year and they're worried. And I said, oh no, you're new meat. Our kids love that. They love to go and bring a new friend in. And so again, it's the atmosphere on a campus. It's teaching kids how to work together and being so positive about working together. But again, it goes down to child-centered classrooms. It really has to be child-centered classrooms.
Veronica, I love that. I absolutely love that. And some of the things that I've taken from this conversation that I really resonate with are the fact that there is free play as part of the philosophy. There's mindfulness as part of the philosophy. There's social development and culture as part of the philosophy, and also integrating and recognizing the stages of brain development. I know we could probably talk for about another 2 hours, but believe it or not, 2 hours have flown by. And before we end, I want to give each of our panelists the opportunity to share some closing thoughts. Now, from what I'm getting, the Institute is actually not for students, it's for training teachers, right? So if you would like to deliver your final thoughts directed towards either a principal or a staff or a teacher and talk about the value of what it is that you've received from this sort of training, that would be probably the most appropriate. And then when you're finished with your final thoughts, please do share your websites or projects that you're working on. And I will remind our audience that you can find all of their links on the show notes page. So Tricia, why don't we go to you first for final thoughts? And like I said, share your websites and projects afterwards.
Great. Well, first off, I want to thank you for including me. It's been a great 2 hours. It has flown by. I always love learning about other philosophies and other ideals, so it's nice to hear from Veronica. And I know what Katie stands for. I hear her talk a lot. So, but I just want to encourage any educator that works with children or counselor or parents, anyone that has children or works with children or around children, to learn more about brain development and the Gurian Institute and the gender lens, because it does make sense once you see it all in the presentation and learn about it and learn strategies that will help children. It's a platform that anybody, like I said, that works with children should really learn about. And number one is our children. We want our children to be successful and safe and well human beings. And I think that this really does that. It will support our children. And with having two sons and, lots of nieces and nephews, and I work with children on a daily basis, I feel very fortunate to be part of the Gurian Institute and have gotten to know Dr. Gurian and Katie, and I'm meeting more people like Veronica all the time, and I'm looking forward to the Institute in San Diego and to learn more every day. And if you want to check out my school website, it's desertsun.org, and we're a great school in Arizona if you have a preschooler, and come play with us. Thank you.
And I want to thank you too. This has been great. Anytime we can get the information out to help kids, I think the biggest, I'd love to see this in every curriculum of every education center, any school teaching education. Every teacher training should have this training. It is the most simple. Honestly, Katie came to my school, what was it, 2 hours, Katie? In 2 hours, she made the greatest impact of any training that I've had on my campus. Because it's real and it's about kids. And when you have teachers who care, they can walk right into the classroom and implement it, and they've been doing it ever since. And so I'm really excited for the future on my campus and making the difference. I'm really looking forward to, I invite everybody to come September 9th and 10th to Sequoia Elementary in Scottsdale to come to the Gurian Institute conference on my campus. I'm joining Katie in Carlsbad, right? I'm going out to Carlsbad for their conference at the end of the month because I want to see more about it. I'm the newbie in all this. I've known Katie forever. We've worked together. We both have the same passion for kids. And so I'm looking forward to being educated even more about Gurian. I'm so impressed with what I've seen so far. And so my project is my campus at Sequoia Elementary in Scottsdale. And I truly can't wait to see the impact it's going to make. So we are just starting this path, but it's already significant. And I believe that it's truly going to be even more significant once I get teachers. And again, I'm really reaching out to my district to get more and more. I want every principal to see this. As a leader on a campus, I need to change their mentality, to change their attitude. And I thank you again. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I think for me, my hope is that the takeaway is to become a citizen scientist for yourself, whether you're a parent, an educator, a community member, administrator, in really looking at the culture of your campus and creating cultures of dignity and respect where students feel comfortable. And the only way they can feel comfortable is if we really, truly understand those brains. So doing your own research, reading some of Dr. Gurian's books. He's written 30 of them. His latest is Saving Our Sons. He wrote a wonderful book called The Wonder of Girls, and a lot of our teacher trainings are based around his book, The Boys and Girls Learn Differently. So there's tons of resources on our websites. And also, if you want to see it in action, we have dozens of Gurian model schools throughout the country. I'm traveling in a couple of weeks to Singapore to train an all-boys school there. So this isn't just a U.S.-based thing. We do things internationally as well. And really, I feel like this is not rocket science. It really isn't. It's deep best practice research and really how kids learn best. So it's not for me personally about boys versus girls and this is boy brain versus girl brain. It's what's best for kids. So our website is GuRineInstitute.com, and I just want to thank Nina and all of you for all of your help in getting this message out to your viewers, and thank you so much for having all of us on tonight.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody on this panel, and thank you to the folks over at the Gurin Institute. It was actually pretty remarkable to learn about the work that you're doing and then to see it, how it actually transforms schools and education. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to Nina, as Katie said, for putting together this panel. And thank you to Mel and Vicki over at the Conscious Consumer Network. We're really grateful to have this platform to broadcast these conversations. So in closing, I just want to say, wherever you are and whatever you do, continue to always do it for the love of learning.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire: the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.